for anybody.
Question 3BB.
Okay.
If you do attempt to repeat it, wouldn't the outcome be based on the assumption that it happened like you thought it did?
Well, there's kind of a difference between theories and, scientific theory anyway, and assumption. I mean, scientific theory at least is something that, they come up with an idea, they try to test it. If the tests kind of show or kind of validate that theory, well, then it becomes scientific theory. Now, can that be proven wrong still? Sure. But, to say that that is the same thing as an assumption or an opinion is kind of different. I mean, if I have an assumption, I'm not a scientist. If I assume something or have an opinion about something, that doesn't necessarily mean that I've tested it or, I've done anything to try to verify that that's true. And that's the difference.
If you said no to that question, this is question 3BC. Explain how not and give 100% infallible, non-opinionated, empirical proof on how it wouldn't be. Question 4.
Already did that.
If I were to solve a math problem and I started solving it at the middle of the equation, would the outcome be an assumption based on the fact that I skipped half the equation?
If you try to do a math problem and you started solving it at the middle of the equation, would the outcome be an assumption based on the fact that you skipped half the equation? Well, not necessarily. It depends on how smart you are and how familiar you are with that type of equation or that type of math, as it were. So the outcome might not necessarily be an assumption. It just, like I said, depends on how smart you are and how familiar you are with the material. Now, yeah, I mean, it just depends. I mean, if you're really stupid and you don't really know anything about math and you just kind of guess and so therefore are making an assumption, then yeah, it's an assumption.
Alright, let's try another one. If I started watching a movie halfway through, will I truly understand the outcome since I missed the beginning of the movie?
No, not necessarily, and that's the same thing as the math question. If you're there's some people that can watch shows and they can predict what the outcome's going to be because they're creative or because they know the psychology of people and humans and whatever. I mean, I do that a lot. You watch a show and okay, well, so A, B, C, and D is going to happen. I can already tell. And you might not even be to the halfway mark of the movie and be able to tell what the outcome is going to be. You might be really good at picking up on the hints that the writer gives as far as what the outcome's going to be. So to say that it's necessarily going to be, an assumption or that you're not going to understand, again, it depends on the person observing said problem or said movie. How smart they are, how much they pick up on things, and if their outcome is actually true or not. Some people have the ability to do that, other people not so much. Now, granted, you're definitely going to be you should be more sure of yourself if you've seen the whole movie or you've looked at the whole math problem. Well, yeah, then that's always a better way to make a conclusion, is based off of the whole thing. I don't recommend that anybody attempt to make a conclusion off of something if they only have half the story. I think that is definitely not a good idea. I think that you can make a guess at something after just seeing it halfway through and then go and look and see, was I right or was I not? But then it depends on the subject matter. If we're talking about God, if we're talking about a deity that you want to worship for your whole life, or fear, or have any reverence for, or change the way you live your life because of, I think that's big enough to where you should know the whole story and not just half of it.
Do you see that the ending is contingent upon the beginning and the beginning on the end?
Yeah, a lot of times, but again, not always.
If you don't have the beginning, the end result will be an assumption.
Not necessarily. Just because you don't have the ending or the beginning or whatever doesn't necessarily that what your conclusion is going to be wrong. You might be smart enough to observe half of something and get it right. However, that's not necessarily the best way to come about a conclusion that you change your whole life on or you are very solid and 100% about. In other words, if I were to start watching a movie halfway through and make an assumption of what was going to happen at the end, I would just call that an assumption. I would say, well, I think I know what's going to happen. It's going to be blah, blah, blah. I might even bet somebody money that I was right about it. But I would never go around saying, I know 100% that this is what's going to happen if I've only seen half the movie. Unless there was something very, very telling involved, that I just knew for sure. But still not the best way to make your bet.
Which cannot be regarded as science, but religion.
Well, even within science, and I think that you have this, maybe jaded idea of what people or what atheists think and feel for one thing, you're going to come across a lot of atheists that aren't atheists just because God is not 100% provable. A lot of atheists are more agnostic, which I guess I kind of lean towards the agnostic side, but for the most part, atheists, they are just basically saying this thing that you're touting as truth, that religion is saying is 100% truth. We're just saying we don't agree with that. We don't believe in that. That doesn't mean that, we're saying that we can 100% prove that God doesn't exist. It just means that this crap that you're saying, there's not enough evidence for us to say, yes, that's true. It's just that simple.
There's an intelligent designer because I can't prove 100% that there is one. I believe there is one.
And proving 100% one way or the other is not necessarily how people make their decision whether to believe in God or to not. The way I look at it is there's a possibility, albeit extremely slight in my head. Sure, maybe the Christian God does exist, but you know what? Even if the Christian God does exist, I still wouldn't worship that God, because to me that God is an evil demiurge who has less morals than humans, has less morals than you and I. And to me, a God should have superior morals to the things that it creates, or the people that it creates, at least. So there's a lot of different reasons why people are atheists besides just, God can't be proven 100% to exist, so therefore he doesn't exist.
However, which brings us to question 5. Since the beginning of your theory can't be proven, nor is it a part of science, how do you expect people to think it's not a religious belief?
I don't care if people do think it's a religious belief. If you want to think science or you want to think atheism is some kind of a religious belief, go right ahead, if it makes you feel better. And then the second part of your question, and why don't you think it's a religious belief since your theory can't be proven, nor is it a part of science? I never said that it wasn't a religious belief, even though technically, if you look up what religion is, then you can see that atheism is not a religious belief. It is a non-belief or a disagreement to the belief in a God. It is basically saying, I do not believe what you're saying you believe. I don't agree with you. That's basically all it is. And as far as it being a theory or an opinion or not being able to be proven, it doesn't matter. We're not touting it as 100% truth. Religion is touting that God is 100% true. And we're basically just saying we don't agree with that, which is why we're called atheists. We do not, or we lack a belief. We lack a belief in God.
And why don't you think it's a religious belief, since your theory can't be proven, nor is it a part of science?
Well, if that were true, that it is a religious belief and it can't be proven and it's not a part of everything that you don't believe. Okay, unicorns for existence, or for example, they can't be proven. There's nothing showing that they exist, or at least there's not enough showing that they exist. Does that mean that if I say I don't believe in unicorns, that that's a religious belief of some sort? Because it's not scientific somehow? I just don't believe it. There's not enough reason for me to believe it.
For any of the previous or following questions, if you're going to fill in the gap by saying, we don't have the answer now, but we will in the future, answer me these questions.
Okay.
This is question 6. Isn't that just the same as saying God did it? You're not answering the question, nor are you admitting you don't know the answer.
I've admitted quite a bit of not knowing the answers.
It's simply filling in your ignorance by giving an unreliable answer based on an assumption.
An unreliable answer based on an assumption. There's no assumption necessary for the things that I've said. And an unreliable answer, I don't know, is not an unreliable answer. I'm telling you I don't know something. I'm not a scientist.